Hello everyone, this is Cindy Sapiano, founder of the Green Almond Club, and welcome to our webinar series. This series is for our Premier members, and we are so glad that you joined us today. Today I have invited Angela Wright to the studio. She is from Align Holistic Health and Nutritional Services, and she has some fantastic information to offer to families. So welcome, Angela.
Thanks very much, Cindy. So I'll just get started. Today what I want to educate everyone on is how we can upgrade and baby step and tweak what we're doing with our food and our lifestyle choices so that we're contributing to the health of our families. What I want you to kind of get from what we're talking about today is about the basics. Let's get back to the fact that we're made of food and water and air and sunshine and love. And that's about all we need to survive and to flourish. So thinking about that, the food choices that we make affect our mood, our learning, our sleep, our energy, development, hormones, productivity, etc., etc. And we're technically made of what we eat. Our body can only work with what it's given. It can't take a marshmallow and turn it into the same raw materials as we would get from a carrot. What we're going to go over today is what makes a whole food whole. Why do we need to eat those foods, and what are they going to give to our body? Why processed foods are not the greatest thing to be a majority of our diet. We're going to talk about how blood sugar regulation works and how that affects our energy and our moods and our hunger. How to properly read a food label, because it's great to eat all sorts of foods that don't have labels, but when we're confronted with those labels, we want to make sure that we're making the better of our choices. Why water should be our beverage of choice, and how to put these into practice. The big thing to keep in mind from this today is that it's all about baby steps, tweaks, and upgrades. There's no need to go over the top and do everything all in one shot, but it's about remembering that every little step forward adds up and can contribute to the health of you and your family. So why do we need food? What do we do with food? Well, we take food and we use it for fuel, for energy. We use it for building materials to build and repair our body and our functions. We use the nutrients from our foods for the reactions that make energy and make our hormones and allow us to break down our bits and pieces. We use food for pleasure and for nourishment satisfaction. And we're designed to get all of these resources from whole foods. And when I say whole foods, I'm thinking about the ones that we can figure out how to grow, raise, harvest, or hunt. Those are the foods that are designed to come with all of the bits and pieces that we need to break them down, absorb what we need, and get rid of what we don't. But we do things to our foods. We have a tendency to think that we can improve on things. We take these foods and we play with them. We take things out, we add things in, we make them more attractive, we make them more shelf-stable, fill them with chemicals, but they become to a point that they're no longer a benefit for our bodies, and instead they're a burden for our body to have to deal with and move these chemicals and substances out of our body. So what I like to think of is a spectrum of optimal to not so optimal foods. I don't like to think of them as good or bad foods because they didn't do anything to us, but they're optimal or not so optimal. And so in the optimal world, I might be looking at something like an organic local apple, and it comes with all the bits and pieces I need to break it down and use it in my body. It's got the enzymes for me to be able to break down that apple. It's got the carbohydrates that I'm going to use for fuel. It's got the vitamins and minerals I need to absorb that fuel and to use those nutrients in my body. It's got the water to get those parts and pieces from A to B within my body. And then it's got the phytonutrients, which are the plant's defense system, which I am going to use to defend myself from my own pests and attacks on my immune system. So in that whole food form, everything all in that nice complete package. So then we take that food and we turn it into something like apple juice. So my body still understands apple juice, but I've lost the fiber and some of the nutrients that I need to get the most out of it. I'm still going to be able to benefit, but there's something missing. Something's been lost along the way. So then we travel all the way down the other end of the spectrum, and I might get one of those like breakfast bars with the apple filling and that kind of thing. Pretty far away from the original apple. So we have taken out lots of bits and pieces along the way, added a lot of things back in, which can include things like high fructose corn syrup and propylene glycol, which I can't figure out how to grow or raise, harvest, or hunt those things. So there's things that my body doesn't have to have a purpose for and has a harder time dealing with. So instead of providing us with energy, it requires energy to process, remove, and store those things. So what we want to talk about today is how to take a look at where we're at and baby step our way up towards the more optimal choices. First off, I want to educate you about some of the background about what is found in our foods. First off, starting with our macronutrients. So that includes our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our fats. And if any of you have been on diets in the past, they're always very either low carb or high protein or no fat. And what I want you to understand is that we have a purpose for all of these, and if we didn't, they wouldn't be found in food. So when we get them in those whole food forms, they're in a form that our body knows how to deal with. So to start off, we have our carbohydrates, and they're the main source of energy for our body and the preferred source of fuel for our brain. And from a whole foods perspective, we want to get those from vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. Now, just to make things complicated, foods do fall into more than one category, but I've kind of lumped them into the one that is their main category that we're going to deal with. So besides carbohydrates, we have proteins, and what proteins do in our body are they're required for all things structural. So they build not just our muscle, but our skin, our hair, our bones. They're responsible for building our immune cells, our digestive tract, anything that has structure. From a whole foods perspective, we want to get these from meat, egg, fish, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, those kind of foods. And then, of course, we have dietary fats. And they have some of the most important roles in our body. For one, they make up the main component of our brain cells. So for us to have a healthy brain cells and be continuing to make those, we need to have good dietary fats in our body. All of our sex and stress hormones are made of fat. So if I want to be emotionally balanced, I need to have good fats in my body. They're an excellent energy source as well. Plus, every one of the trillions of cells in my body are surrounded by a membrane that's made of fat. So every day when I'm making new cells, I want to have the good fats to make those membranes healthy and to be able to do their role in my body. So how do I decide what is a whole food source of fat? If a fat is naturally found in a food, it's there for a reason. So are things like nuts and seeds, avocados, our fatty fish, eggs, coconut and coconut oil, olive and olive oil, those kind of foods are great optimal sources of fats in our diet. So that's the optimal end. Well, we take all of these and we turn them into the not so optimal end as well. So for instance, here's a whole grain. So this is one of our carbohydrates, and say this could be a grain of wheat, brown rice, corn, it could be barley, things like that. This also accounts for sugar as well, the same kind of process. So in that whole grain form, it's got the bran that includes the fiber that I need to break down and absorb that food in my body. The fiber slows down the release of sugar so that my body can use that nice and slowly. It's also really important for good colon health, and that's how we get toxins out of our body. The germ comes complete with all the vitamins and minerals and the good fats that I need to break down that grain in my body, use its nutrients, and be able to benefit from it. And then I've got the endosperm, which is the starch or the sugars that I'm going to use for energy. So when it's in that whole grain form, all the bits and pieces, I need to use it appropriately. But we refine those things. We now have our white sugar, white flour, white pasta, white bread, white rice. We have taken away the bran and we've taken away the germ, and all that we have left is the endosperm. So no bran left in those white grain products, so that can lead to poor colon health, toxic buildup in our body because the toxins don't have a way out, and it also causes our blood sugar to do some spiking because there's no fiber to slow down the release of sugar. We are also missing the germ. So in that germ came the exact vitamins and minerals I needed to break down that food in my body. They're no longer there. All I'm left with is the endosperm, or the starch, or the sugar. So I eat this white bread, my body goes, thanks, but I was missing X, Y, and Z vitamins and minerals that are required to break that down and use it properly in my body. So now my body goes looking for those. So it takes calcium from my bones to break down that food. It takes magnesium from my bloodstream, and magnesium is my relaxation mineral. It takes zinc from my immune system, etc., all just to break down these refined foods in our body. So not only are they not of benefit to us, they're actually detrimental to the good things that we are doing with our diet. So that's why we're trying to move away from refined carbohydrates, refined white sugar, white flour, white rice, white pasta, white bread in our diets. We also do some refining to our proteins and our fats as well. So there, if I take a look at that spectrum, there's a big difference between a whole chicken and a chicken nugget. There's a big difference between a pork chop and a hot dog. There's a big difference between an egg and an egg white, because an egg white isn't a complete food anymore. I needed the fat that was in the yolk to absorb the protein and the minerals that are found in the white. So getting back to the whole food form of things provides us with all the bits and pieces we need to use them appropriately. With fats, we like to alter them. We've made trans fats, we modified fats, they're hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated, and we fry things to temperatures that they're not stable at, and that's why they cause damage in our body. So getting back to the things like fats that naturally come in food, avocados, and nuts and seeds, those kind of things are great sources of those good fats in our diet. Dairy, I like to keep in a category on its own because dairy can contain carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. But dairy can also fall anywhere on that spectrum as well, right? There's a big difference between raw milk straight from the cow and skim milk powder. There's a big difference between the two. So if one chooses to eat dairy, we want to make sure that it's higher up on that scale so that we can properly benefit from it. So with all of this, we just want to start taking a look at what we're doing and saying, okay, so if currently I'm making a choice that is maybe not so optimal, I want to upgrade it a little bit. How can I get it that little bit closer to the optimal of the choices? And we're going to talk about all sorts of ways we're going to implement this as we go through today. I also want to explain to you about blood sugar and how that can affect our energy, our fatigue, our sleep, our cravings, and our moods. All sorts of things that are affected by the amount of sugar that we have in our bloodstream. So we have a specific amount of sugar, ideally at any given time in our bloodstream, so that our body can use that sugar to make energy. When we eat carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, they're digested at different rates. So I can eat those carbohydrates, and they're going to be digested first. They're the first thing that my body breaks down, so the first bit of energy that I can benefit from. When I have proteins with that, they take a little longer to break down, so they're going to slow down the release of energy into my system. And when I add fats to that, that's even going to take longer to break down. So by having the fats in there, now I have a nice consistent amount of energy over a longer period of time. So over the course of the day, ideally, we're getting up, we're having a nice balanced breakfast that gives us the energy to make it through to the time we have our snack, and then to our lunch and our dinner as the day carries on, and we have a nice consistent level of energy. But that isn't always the reality to what we're doing on a regular basis. So I'm sure many of us have once in a while skipped breakfast, or unfortunately maybe breakfast isn't a regular part of your day. So whether we're skipping breakfast, whether it's because we're having refined carbohydrates that are missing the fiber, so we get that spot and that crash from eating those choices, or even if I have that great meal but I go 5-6 hours after it, our blood sugar can get too low. This can result in symptoms like headaches and migraines, mood swings, anxiety, fatigue, irritability, lack of focus, concentration, forgetfulness, shakiness, dizziness, and of course, cravings for fast-acting sugar. Because I have low sugar, what do I need? Sugar to bring it back up. So those are some of the things that go along with that. And what our body technically does is if our blood sugar gets too low, we can pass out or go into a coma. So our body has mechanisms to make sure that doesn't happen. When our blood sugar dips too low, my body senses stress. There must be some kind of crisis as to why I'm not getting to eat this nice meal. So it thinks there's either a war, a famine, or I'm being chased by a bear. Something of actual stress. And so if I'm in war or famine or being chased by a bear, my body doesn't know when it's going to get its next balanced meal. So what it does is it goes into crisis mode by releasing one of our stress hormones, cortisol. Into our system, we release cortisol, and one of the things it does is releases stored sugars from our liver and our muscles, that's glycogen, so that we don't pass out. Yay, I can carry on. So that's how we can get away with skipping breakfast every day and being totally fine. But my body is still in that crisis mode. And when it's in crisis mode, it goes, ooh, I better conserve and store the energy that I have to get me through the famine or the crisis. So when we're using that cortisol, it's causing us to store our food as fat and burn our muscle as energy, which is kind of the opposite of what we're looking for. So that's when our blood sugar gets too low. The other end of it is when it gets too high. So when we're eating those refined carbohydrates, that white bread, white rice, white pasta, white sugar, white flour, no fiber to slow down the release of glucose. So our sugar goes up quickly. And all of a sudden we have too much glucose sugar in our system that our body can't use at that time. We secrete extra insulin, and that insulin takes that sugar out of our blood and puts it into our tissue cells. Once it's there, we can either burn it as energy or store it as fat. From there, we over-secrete our insulin and we crash, and then we either get into those cravings and carry on the cycle, or those symptoms I mentioned before, the shakiness, the mood swings, the fatigues, the headaches. So as our blood sugar is too high, we're hyper and we're storing our energy. When our blood sugar is too low, we're conserving and we're storing our energy. Both not ideal for working on the obesity epidemic that is going through our country. One other thing to get out of this is that all calories are not created equal, right? This is a big pet peeve of mine with the 100-calorie snacks that are out there. All of a sudden we've decided that 100 calories of anything is fine, as long as it's only 100 calories. But if I take that 100 calories of jujubes, which is refined sugar, artificial color, artificial sweetener, and some flavoring, that sugar is going to go quickly into my bloodstream. I'm going to take that sugar, put it in my tissue cells, where I'm either going to burn it as energy or store it as fat, and then I'm going to crash and crave more food sooner than later. Versus, I could take that 100 calories and have 100 calories of almonds. Almonds have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. If I have those, I have a nice, consistent amount of energy for a longer period of time. I didn't get hyper, I didn't store any of that away as fat, and I also had the energy to last me longer in the day before I needed to eat again. So keeping in mind that all calories are not created equal. This is one of the patterns that I often see with parents, but as well as their kids. So think of this as a typical day. So maybe we rushed out of the house, maybe we grabbed an apple on the way, maybe we had a piece of toast, maybe we had a coffee. Maybe at lunchtime we maybe grabbed a salad or half a sandwich, maybe a piece of fruit later in the day. But then by the time we get home and we get to relax a little, our body goes, whew, the crisis is over. I better start stocking up for tomorrow's. So we open the cupboards and we go, oh, look at all this food. And I'm going to start eating all of this food that's going on while I'm figuring out what to make for dinner. And then we eat dinner. And then after dinner, we crave and snack even more. This is the opposite of if we got that energy down to the earlier part of the day, got those food sources earlier in the day when we are actually designed to use energy. So what it comes down to in the reality is that the child that skips breakfast goes to school on no fuel, the body goes into crisis response so that they can ward off a bear, but they don't have concentration on their school tasks. A parent that skips breakfast and fuels themselves on caffeine stimulation instead goes into that crisis mode, doesn't get the proper hunger signals at lunch, gets home, cleans out the cupboard before and after dinner, and that's going to contribute to excess weight. Maybe your child is eating sugar cereal or white bread for breakfast, and then they get that surge of glucose when they get to school, so their teacher has to deal with them being hyperactive, and then they crash, and then they can't concentrate, and then they eat more junk for lunch, they repeat it, and over time this is affecting their concentration, their attention, their learning, and contributing to the onset of type 2 diabetes, obesity, and ADHD. And parents do the same. That constant up and down of blood sugar doesn't make for balanced mood, focus, or productivity, and also causes our body to store more fat. So what we're looking for this is our argument for why we want to eat breakfast, why we want to have snacks and lunch continuously throughout the day. It allows us to have more constant energy, better concentration, balanced moods, and better weight management. So how do we start making better choices when we choose what to eat? So like I mentioned, ideally we want foods without labels, things that we can grow, raise, harvest, or hunt. But in the grand scheme, we're not making everything from scratch every day. So we want to know how to make those choices better when we have those choices in front of us. And this is my little guideline for label reading. We're skipping the marketing labels, scanning the nutrition facts, and scouring the ingredient label. Skip, scan, and scour. So let's start with the marketing label. So what we want to say when we're looking at these is, what are they trying to sell you? So when I look at this slide, I see 35% of my daily fiber. I see sugar-free and fat-free, 100 calories. Those are all catchphrases that the marketers want to sell us on. What we should be asking is, what else am I getting besides fiber in that granola / candy bar that is providing 35 grams of fiber? Sugar-free and fat-free, what has been put in its place? What am I getting instead of sugar or fat? 100-calorie packets. 100 calories of what? What is that 100 calories going to do in my body? Sensible solution. That's put on by the company to say, hey, compared to the rest of the things we sell, this isn't so bad. And one of my favorites, something like the Pink Ribbon campaign on an alcoholic beverage where alcohol contributes to cancer. So putting those things together and thinking those through really get us to think, okay, we're skipping the marketing label because it's not necessarily in our best interest. Then we move on to the nutrition facts, and we want to scan the nutrition facts. It's about asking ourselves, where are those numbers coming from? Where are the fats coming from? Where are the calories coming from? So I take a look at this label and I go, okay, this is for chocolate-covered turtles. I want to know, can I actually have 2 turtles? Can I have the whole box of turtles? Is this 1/4 of a turtle? That's what we want to take a look for in terms of the serving size. Then I look at the calories, 220 calories, but of what? Are those 220 calories coming from high fructose corn syrup, or are they coming from avocados? They're doing a big difference in our body. Same with the total fat. Are those fats coming from a refined fat, or are they coming from nuts and seeds? One thing to keep in mind is the sodium level. Ideally, over the course of the day, we want to keep our sodium under the 1,500 milligrams per day limit. For children, about 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per day of sodium. But in general, the rest of it, we're just taking a look at and going, okay, great. Sugars from what? Fats from what? Protein from what? Those are the questions we want to ask. The numbers across the bottom, the vitamin A, C, calcium, and iron, they don't really tell us a whole lot. For instance, we know there is more than 2 vitamins and 2 minerals, so that isn't going to give us the whole picture of the nutrient value of this food. And also these percent daily values are based on the bare minimum a person needs to survive. So we want to do much more than survive. We want to benefit from our foods. So we're scanning the nutrition facts. But the real bits and pieces come in when we're reading the ingredient label. Now, the foods in the ingredient label, in the small print of course, are listed in order of most to least in that food. What we want to be able to do from these ingredient lists is say, okay, can I pronounce everything? Are those all foods that my body knows what to do with? I'm looking for short lists. Can I recognize all the things in there? Can I avoid additives, preservatives, artificial sweeteners and flavors and colorings? Can I avoid things like acronyms? MSG, BHT, those kind of things don't grow on a tree. Numbers, like Blue Lake number 2, not found in the ground. So when I take a look at this list, I go, well, those aren't actually foods. My body doesn't know what to do with those. Those are a whole lot of things that my body has more, it's going to have to spend more time processing and getting rid of than anything that I can benefit from this. So just so you know, this is a wild berry Pop-Tart label. So somewhat common in my day of growing up when I was a kid. And what we want to do from that is go, okay, what is the better of my options? Can I pick up the next product beside it and say, hey, is it a shorter list? Can I pronounce things? Are there less numbers and acronyms? It can literally be that simple to do the little upgrades. And then we get to the really great stuff, like some of the bars that literally this ingredients in this product, dates, almonds, and unsweetened cherries. Short list, everything that I know how to grow or raise, harvest, or hunt. No numbers, no artificial anything, nice and simple. And these are options that are available for us out there. So when we run into something, upgrade to the better of the options that are available. And the biggest thing is to be aware of what we're doing and saying, hey, this maybe isn't the best of my choice, but it's what fits into my lifestyle right now. Next time, I'll work on something a little bit better. Another point that I wanted to get across to you today is the importance of water. So our body is primarily made of water. It's about 60-75% water, and that's how we get things from A to B throughout our body. We're losing it all day. We're going to the washroom and we're breathing and we're sweating and we're talking and we're becoming dehydrated as the day goes on. And a 4 to 5% drop in hydration can lead to a 30 to 40% drop in energy, performance, and just overall well-being. So ideally, we want to be putting in those 8, 10 to 12 cups for adults of water back into our day. What we do instead often is we drink coffee and alcohol. Maybe our kids are drinking, or ourselves, are drinking pop or slushies and those kind of things, and pretending that those are the hydration of our body. Well, if I take that cup of coffee, for every 1 cup of coffee I drink, I'm losing 2 cups of water that are being flushed out of my system. So often the liquids that we are choosing are causing us to be even more dehydrated. So our water should be our main beverage of choice. When we're getting into dehydration, it's not only affecting our energy production, but our joint health. It's contributing to wrinkles, performance, focus. Our blood cholesterol levels are affected by dehydration, as well as high blood pressure. So it's about taking a look at what we're doing and saying, hey, how can I make this a little bit better? And that's where we want to get to, where to start. So what do I do with this information that I've just been given? First off, it's a really great idea to figure out where you're at so you know where you want to get to. And journaling and writing down your food and beverage intake is a really great idea. So making this a family affair and saying, hey, we're going to take 3 or 4 or 5 days and we're going to write down what we eat and when we eat it, what we drink, when we're drinking it, and seeing how that affects our moods and our energy and our sleep. It's great to have that baseline so we know how to improve. So we want to have a baseline, so we're going to start by writing and journaling. We want to work on those upgrades, right? So when we run out of something, we want to improve on it. The greatest impact is going to be made by the things that you go through most often. So if you go through loaves of bread or boxes of cereal, say you go through tons of juice or crackers or cookies, those are the things that by making some tweaks in those purchases, you're going to have a pretty big effect on your overall diet of your family. So starting with some of those and saying, hey, I'm going to flip my white bread up to whole grain bread. I'm going to flip my whole grain bread up to sprouted grain bread, and start to work your way up the spectrum that way. Upgrading the foods that you go through most of, biggest impact. The other thing to keep in mind while doing all of this is the 80-20 way of eating. And what that gets into our head is that if 80% of the time we're making the healthier of our choices, our body can totally handle the 20% of the choices that we make that may not be so healthy, but that we highly enjoy. Those things that we're having dessert with friends and family in a nice relaxed setting. Yes, it might be full of white sugar and white flour, but your body is going to be more able to handle it when it's something that we enjoy. And this 80-20, what it means is that there's no dieting, there's no depriving, there's no foods that we can never have. It's about choosing when to have those foods that are maybe not the most beneficial. So that 80-20 always gives us some balance. In that, though, it's a great time to start avoiding using those not so optimal foods as treats or rewards in our life. Why is it that we choose negative foods for positive rewards? It's very hard for kids especially to get their mind around that. Why am I being rewarded with something that's not good for me? So other sources of fun for treating, games night, activities, points towards a big family trip, things like that can be used instead of junk food as a source of reward. When you do your little bit of journaling, now you're going to start to ask some questions. Do you and your family eat breakfast? That's a really great place to start. How can we make that happen? Does it mean I need to get up 5 minutes earlier? Do I need to prepare things the night before? Do I need to get something quick so that I can eat it on the way? Anything that's going to start to get those habits into your life. Take a look. Do you eat meals and snacks regularly throughout the day? Is it because you're not taking anything with you and you get out and you get busy and you're at work and you don't have any snacks? Being prepared, packing your meals and snacks the night before, planning big things on the weekend is a great way to make it much easier to get those meals and snacks into our lifestyle. Do those things that I'm choosing have carbs, proteins, and fats in them? Or am I just eating, say, just carbohydrates? Am I having toast for breakfast, sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner? How can I start to switch that up and get some more variety, and especially some more variety of our macronutrients in our lifestyle? How many servings of fruit and vegetables do you eat over the course of the day? Can you add 1 or 2 more into your grocery list? You can buy them. Are they not getting eaten? Do they need to be cut up? Do they need to be prepared? How can you get them into your regular diet? What and how much are you drinking? What are you getting into your body for hydration? Is it hydrating you, or is it becoming dehydrating? These are little places that are really great to start, and they're going to make a huge impact on your lifestyle. Now, you can see that they didn't say, oh, you need to eat X number of this, and these are great foods, and these are not great foods. And part of that is because all of our foods that come from nature have a benefit. They all kind of come in the ratios that we need to eat them in. And the more that we pay attention to what our body is asking for, and the more aware of what we're doing and how it affects our mood and our energy, the easier it is to make these great decisions without knowing all the bits and pieces about the numbers and that kind of thing. So I just want to conclude with remembering that it's all about the baby steps. So literally, it's those small changes over time that will become healthy, happy habits for life. And when these things are challenging, it is someone like me as a holistic nutritional consultant that can help you make those particular food choices, change up the diet, change up the goals and your choices, especially if there's a health concern in the mix there, that can help you get you on your way. Just wanted to close with one of my favorite quotes. If you don't take care of your body, where are you going to live? And that's by Lyndon Smith. So thanks very much for participating with me today, and feel free to sign up at my website for our e-newsletter where there's lots of recipes and stuff as well. So now I'm going to pass this back to Cindy.
Wow, Angela, that was just fantastic. The amount of information that you gave, I'm very excited about it. And I have to say, personally, my own family, I have 2 daughters and myself, and the 3 of us have decided recently over the last month to really get back to the basics and try and change our eating and get back to just eating healthy for a variety of different reasons. And I got a pass at the gym, so I'm going to the gym with my daughter and just making all these huge changes. And it's exciting. It is so exciting because already I can see how I'm feeling different, they're feeling different, and it's just very cool. Even my daughter, she's 15, she said to me, gee, Mom, just the other day, as a matter of fact, it was about 3 days ago, she said, gee, Mom, you know, when you said you decided to go on this health kick, I didn't realize some of the food was going to be so good. So I thought, yes, okay, this is good. I'm doing it right. And interestingly enough, when she was 3, she decided she was not going to eat meat anymore. And I still, all these years later, that's still a challenge for me because I am a meat eater. I love meat, and so does my youngest daughter. But of course, you know, as a mom, oh my gosh, you know, I want to make sure my daughter's getting everything that she needs, and so, you know, you have to kind of plan out your meals. You want to make the vegetarian meals. You want to make sure that she's getting enough protein, and that has been a challenge. But recently, since we've kind of band together as a family and try to make some of these changes, it's really been fun kind of coming up with these recipes because I don't enjoy cooking vegetarian. I like, because I enjoy my meat so much. I think about, when I think about a lasagna, which I don't have very often, maybe once every 6 weeks or something because it takes, it's a lot of work to prepare that, then I don't think about a veggie lasagna. I want my real lasagna. But anyways, it's just been such a really great experience, and how much myself and my youngest daughter are actually enjoying all these beans and legumes and all the, the black bean soup that we just had the other day. It's just fantastic.
And part of that is just getting everyone on board with the fact that there are more choices out there, right? And getting in touch with, hey, how do I make this tasty? How do I incorporate protein in other ways, right? Because some people do well on meat and some people don't, and it's not required, but we do need to get those proteins from those sources like the beans and legumes. So that's great that the family is working together on that, Cindy.
Well, absolutely. I remember as a kid one day, because of course all we grew up with was the white bread. And I remember one day, I must have been, I don't know, probably around 10-ish, and all of a sudden one day my mom comes home and says, that's it, no more white bread in the house. I was so mad. And she just made this immediate switch to all this brown bread, and it was good, but yeah, just making that change, I remember how dramatic it was. So I know for me and my family, we've tried to kind of go about it slowly, a little bit of baby steps like you had suggested. Keep a track of everything that we're doing, and so yeah, it's quite an education. It's been an interesting process, but so far so good. And I'm surprised that there are so many other foods out there, if you know how to prepare them, that actually are enjoyable, that are good. Because I know that as well, I come from a generation, as most of us, meat and potatoes, and still today, it's a meat and potato society, and yet there's so much more. Yeah, and it's.
I grew up with that too, but with the processed world, and until I was in my 20s, I spelled cheese with a Z.
Yeah.
Cheese with, because that's what I grew up with, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's important, I think, too, for the listeners to hear, is that I didn't grow up like this. I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't grow all my own things. Nobody canned anything. This was stuff that I've just, over time, incorporated into my life. When you know why you're making a choice, it makes it so much easier, and it makes it so much tastier when you know that it's of benefit for you, instead of fighting it. When you're fighting a change, it's not going to taste good.
No, of course.
But if you're ready to embrace it, then of course there's going to be some good and some bad, but you're so much more open to it when you know you're doing it for a positive benefit.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions, and of course I'm going to come from a personal perspective here, because just using my own life. Now, you shared in your presentation, you talked about the importance of breakfast, and of course we've all heard for years how important it is to eat breakfast, and you need to give your body that energy and that fuel first thing in the morning. And I purposed, when my children were young, we would sit down as much as possible when they were really young, and have breakfast. And I really worked hard at doing that. But for me, even today, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry. And I find, like, okay, you got to eat, but I'm not hungry. And so it's an interesting thought process that goes through my mind. Well, I'll eat a little bit later, but I'm just not hungry. And so sometimes I'll be awake for a couple hours before I actually eat something, and I know that that's not a good thing. But I don't know I would like to wake up in the morning and feel like, okay, I need energy. I want to eat something, because it feels awkward to me to eat what I don't really feel like I have a need to eat, if that makes sense. Yep. So why is it that I'm not hungry? Why is that happening, or what am I doing wrong? Or right, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, so part of it is what your body is used to, right? So your body is currently kind of just used to getting up in the morning and going, right? So it's kind of like you get into that crisis mode right away. Yeah. So your body isn't going to give you hunger signals, because if you're in a crisis, right, if you're being chased by a bear, literally our resources go away from our digestive system and into dealing with the crisis of the day. So literally, our body stops making those digestive juices, and with that comes our hunger signals. So when we're used to just getting up and going, our body just gets up and goes. But then what happens is we end up eating most of our food later in the day when our body is finally at a bit of a rest, and we take that food and we store it away for tomorrow's crisis.
Yeah.
But because then we're eating so much more later in the day, we're not hungry by the time we wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
So the gradual way to start working on that is starting off with fruit. Start off with fruit in the morning and just say, hey, I'm getting up, I'm having a grapefruit.
Yep.
Or I'm having half a banana. Or I'm just having something to start my body on the path of knowing, hey, wait a minute, there's no crisis. It's okay to eat. I'm going to start to increase that into my day. And with that comes the proper signals at lunch and snacks during the day, so that by the time we get to dinner, it's more about topping up for our day instead of stocking up for tomorrow. So we can have, and that's kind of what it is, we can take the same amount of food density, and if we have it later in the day, we're going to store more of that as fat. If we take that same food and eat it earlier in the day, we're going to be able to use those resources as the day goes on and use them more effectively. So part of it is just getting your body to get the fact it's allowed to be hungry in the morning. And it's very much a baby steps, and it's started by something simple like fruit or toast or something, just to say, hey, body, there's no crisis. And it's funny, too, in our culture how really the big meal is at supper time. It is at dinner. You know, that's the time. And it's great to sit, you know, with your family and gather together and talk about your day and so on and so forth. That whole process is great. But and I have heard that teaching before, you know, that we need to eat more during the day, and we don't really need a very big dinner. But you know, our culture is different. You know, it just we just do things a little bit differently. And I can certainly see, like I know the breakfast, how important that is. So I appreciate those tips, and I'm going to definitely get on them. I know I'm on them with my kids, which is kind of funny because I do know how important it is that kids have that breakfast because they are off to school. I mean, we're off to work, but they're off to school too. They still got to concentrate. They got to focus, and they want to be able to put their best foot forward and, you know, pass their tests and do, you know, the things that they need to do during the school. So that really is an important thing for us as parents to keep in mind, to, you know, make sure that they start off their day with breakfast. But kids are sponges as well, right? So they see that, oh, when I get to be an adult, I don't have to eat breakfast. Absolutely. Modeling is so powerful. I know. It's so true. Yeah, without a doubt. Now I wanted to kind of just switch gears because I had just a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. And one of them, like in the very beginning of your presentation, which of course you had mentioned the importance of fruits and vegetables and grains. And of course we've been hearing for years about how important fruits and veggies are. And I love fruits and veggies. And it's interesting though, since I've kind of started on my, you know, just making some healthier changes for me and my family, I noticed that, you know, as much fruits and vegetables that I eat, I wasn't eating enough. And really, we can eat tons of them because, like, we can just keep eating them. You know, it's, and it just was an interesting awareness of how much, you know, I wasn't really eating. And here I was thinking I was eating enough, but I wasn't really eating enough, you know, once I started kind of that journaling process. But my question was actually in the area of grains, because grains are so important, and especially, you know, with the fiber, and I guess we can find fiber in our fruits and vegetables too. But even there's like a teaching that's going around about, you know, you don't want to eat bread. Too much bread is not good. So how else do we get our grains, you know, incorporate that within our diet in a healthy way if we don't want to eat a bunch of bread? Right. So there are lots of great nutrients in grains, but because we because we use wheat as a filler, because we use soy as a filler, because we use corn as a filler, more and more people are getting allergies and intolerances to gluten, to wheat, to soy, those into corn. Those are high up in the allergy list. And part of that is because we think of those grains, so we think of grains and we think of bread and pasta and maybe we'll have some rice and that kind of thing. But there are over 500 different kinds of grains out there. But because we've only eaten these couple of them, we can't keep up with digesting them and getting them out of our body properly. So the thing to keep in mind about grains is that, and bread, is that bread's not a whole food. Right? That isn't how the grain came. So it's about doing things like, can I try quinoa? So quinoa is a nice little grain that is a complete protein. So we don't even have to worry about mixing it with the beans and legumes and that kind of thing. Can I have brown rice? Can I put barley in my soup? Can I use kamut pasta instead of wheat pasta, and just kind of getting variety in there. I think variety is the biggest key in terms of that, but it's also about thinking that grains aren't the be-all and the end-all to our diet, and focusing more on those fruits and vegetables would be more of a benefit. And that's the thing, is that those fruits and vegetables are literally our best source of our vitamins and our minerals, and that's what we use for disease prevention. So the more, my little rule is about having, if I can have a serving of fruit or vegetable every time I eat, then I'm much closer to my 8 to 10 servings by the end of the day than if I tried to get them all in at dinner, right? It's really hard to get that in. Fruits and vegetables are most, vegetables especially, high nutrient density to low calorie density. So you can eat them and eat them and eat them and gain a lot of benefits without having extra fullness in your diet.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Now, with all this that you've presented and you know, the whole thing about not just healthy eating but the whole healthy lifestyle, the whole package that goes with it, what to an average family, now everybody is, you know, these days you know, watching their money, we're all on a budget and so on and so forth. I wonder if you could speak, Angela, for just a few moments about like, what does this cost to make these kind of changes, you know, to start looking at maybe eating a little bit healthier and implementing these things within a family. What are we looking at as far as cost, or maybe you can let us know a bit about that?
Yep. I hear a lot about the cost of things. And there's expensive ways to do it, and there are not so expensive ways to do it. So if I'm switching up something, and so maybe I'm going from a loaf of white bread to a sprouted grain bread, yes, that's going to be more costly. But if I did something like switched up my instant oatmeal packets to a bag of slow cook or steel cut oats, there's huge savings in that. The more we can take away our packaged convenience foods and get them back down to the bricks and mortars, like if I could actually just buy the grain and then make it up and add my own raisins and cinnamon and walnuts and that kind of good thing. A, I know what's going in it, and B, that's much more cost effective than me buying the things on there in already packaged. So when we get to eating things like apples and bananas and lettuce and tomatoes, those things are going to be much more cost effective than the packaged varieties of food. So the more we can take something that we're doing packaged and getting it back to not so packaged, there'll be some savings there. There's also savings when we buy seasonally, right? Because if something is grown, because there's more supply available, ideally if it's local, there's not a lot of transportation costs. It's going to be higher in nutrients. If I take the time to stock up then, put things in my freezer, start canning again. That's one of the skills that has really been lost that we need to start embracing again. But just even putting strawberries away in the freezer when it's strawberry season, those are still going to taste way better and be much more cost effective than I try to buy strawberries in February that aren't going to taste very good anyways. And then the other one is that we spend a lot of money on meat, and when we can start using meat more as a side dish versus the main component, then we can still have our meat, but I'm going to fill up that space with more vegetables and vary our vegetables, right? So I'm going to have some kind of green, whether it's a salad or maybe I have sauteed spinach or something. Maybe if I'm having a starchy vegetable, I'll switch it up from potatoes, and some days I'll have yams, and some days I'll have turnip, and some days I'll have beets or carrots. And then having some broccoli or cauliflower, all those kind of things. The more we've got variety there, and meat is kind of like just our little quadrant at the top, our little kind of side dish, that meat money is going to go farther as well. So
Absolutely.
I can afford to maybe go for the free-range chicken versus the regular because I'm going to eat a little less of it.
Right. Of course, of course. Well, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And really, we don't need that much meat. We need the meat, but we don't need as much as we really do eat.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's fantastic. Those are some great tips.
Lovely.
Yeah, those are some great tips that you've given us.
And with that too, Cindy, just to finish up on that, is that of all the things that we spend our money on, we should be spending a lot of money on food. Really, right? Like, that. Do I want to spend less money on food than I spend on my cable and internet bill?
Yeah.
Really, right? Because this is what is going to prevent illness down the road. If I want to have a high quality of life and I want to stay healthy during it, I want to spend the money now on those foods to keep me going so that I don't have to spend it later on health care.
Well, of course, absolutely, because we want to be healthy. We want to take care of ourselves. And, of course, as single parents, to be able to take care of our kids and be able to give our kids 100% of us, and then to be able to teach our kids so that they can give their kids 100% of themselves. And it just continues on. Yeah, it's so important, and that's a very good point to bring up. Really, what are your values and what's important? Is food more important than TV and having a healthy lifestyle? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, very good points. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for spending your time with us today and for sharing so much. There's just so much information here. It's just fantastic. And I see when I look at my computer screen, you have your website information up there so people know how to get in touch with you. And a phone number. Do you have a phone number or anything I can give out to people?
Yep. In Kelowna, it's 250-451-9208.
Fantastic. So people can give you a call. They can look on your website. They can sign up for your newsletter and get in touch with you if they'd like any further information.
Please do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Angela, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Cindy. You too.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.